So now we're going to hear directly from three artists. Alison Judd will be the first. Allison's practice is rooted in printmaking and also as it intersects with sculpture, and you'll see that in the work she'll discuss. She has her BFA in printmaking from Concordia College and Concordia University in Montreal, and her MFA in print media from York University in Toronto. She's received a lot of awards and accolades and many residencies that are new to me because they're up in Canada, but it'll be interesting to learn about them. So I want to thank her for being here and give the mic to you, Alison, for a few minutes. Terrific.
Not used to mic, let me know if it's close enough. All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much. This is wonderful. It's a wonderful opportunity, and it's a wonderful space and resource for printmakers, so I'm really happy to be here. So this is my piece here. I have a background in printmaking, but I find my work is also moving into what I might call sculpture. I'm not quite sure yet. It's still very much paper-based. But I'm interested in installation and building things out of prints. So print can be very much a starting point for me. So this work in particular, it's called Even the Continents Have No Place But Earth, Map 1. So I've been thinking about the movement of the Earth, time and change, and how we experience and cope with that. It's very much based in the work of a Canadian poet and philosopher called Jan Zwicky. And she has written pieces about the cyclical nature of change and how that sort of slow pace is something that we can use to mark other losses against. So it's interesting, in these changing times, as we think about how this kind of movement can be slow and cyclical, but it can also be sudden and catastrophic, and how we sort of, as humans, approach that. So this is called Map 1 because I'm interested in this idea also of how the Earth is described scientifically through scientific diagrams, geologic sort of information, and how that kind of imagery can tell us a lot, facts, but how, for me too, it misses things. So I'm interested in how metaphor and materiality can bring in other meanings back to these things to help me understand the Earth and how we view it. So this piece is, technically, it's a relief print. I work a lot with wood. I'm interested in sort of printing objects in the surface of things. So it's a woodcut primarily, with not any carving, it's just the wood. It's almost a woodcut. And so I print them. I use Japanese paper a lot. I love Japanese papers. It's a wonderful, strong material that allows you to do many things with it. So I print on Japanese paper, and then I dye the paper. The gray color comes from sumi ink, just a water-based ink. And then I starch it with konnyaku paste, which allows the paper to be even stronger. And that allows me to cut it out. And then I'm exploring this idea of folding and sewing and creating things that are dimensional, I guess. Yeah, so for me, I'm thinking about maps and information and tectonics and the movement of the plates and things like that. So it's obviously a fictional space, but it's somewhere that helps me to think about all of these things.
Terrific. Thank you very much. We have residencies at Denbo Fellowship, Pyramid Atlantic, Vermont Studio Center, Women's Studio Workshop, and many others. Her MFA is from the University of Iowa, and her BFA is from Pennsylvania State University. And this piece is a print, and it's an installation. It's paper, and it's one panel of many. We couldn't fit more in, and I'm sorry for that, but we will in the future. So come speak and tell us a little bit about what's happening with this unusual work on paper.
Thank you so much. Thanks. So so this piece is mine. It's called Hanging Gardens. It's a pigment print on awagame inbei thin paper. I live in Northeast Ohio near Cleveland, and the image is from the Cleveland Botanical Garden, which is a place where I spend a lot of time. I take a lot of photographs and make a lot of drawings there. And what interests me about botanical gardens, well, there's a few different things that interest me about botanical gardens. That they're very specific places, but they're also sort of no place at all. They're very dislocated landscapes, and that's something that is really interesting to me, that I can go to Cleveland and I can experience a tropical landscape. I can go from, there being a foot of snow to going inside and being in a completely different kind of space. And I'm interested in that kind of dislocation that happens. And so in this piece, I made the image, and I digitally manipulated it and blurred it. I'm interested in this process of blurring because it kind of it makes it indistinguishable between foreground and background. When you're in a place like a botanical garden, you're supposed to experience the leaves and the beautiful flowers and the plants, and you're not supposed to pay attention to this huge structure, this huge system that's holding all of that stuff up. I'm really interested in flattening that space through this process of blurring, so it all kind of becomes one plane. And then when I was making the piece, I really just kind of wanted to disrupt that pictorial plane by cutting into it to disrupt that illusion. Again, just like how the blurring kind of disrupts the illusion, and make you realize that it's an image and that it's a material. And I was just also, I love this type of paper. I think it's really, really beautiful. It's really, even though it's very strong, even though it's very thin, it's very strong. And so I really wanted to kind of push and see what it could do, and still keep a general shape, but how much could I cut into it or sort of break it down, and have it still hold its shape in this general kind of banner. So the original piece is multi-parts, and it kind of breaks a space in half, and you're meant to walk all the way around it. I think they did a beautiful job installing it with just this one banner here, so thank you so much for that. But yeah, I was really interested in cutting into it and having the plants and the shapes kind of get pushed back or pushed forward and start to become sculptural, or start to talk about space, or start to talk about the materiality of the paper. Thanks.
His MFA and PhD in fine art from the University of Castilla-La Mancha in Spain. He's also received many fellowships and accolades and awards in the field. And you were a visiting artist teacher at Rutgers Center for Innovative Printing Paper. So it's not your first time on these books here.
No.
Terrific. So everyone sort of come around. It's these two pieces here, and let me hand the mic over to you.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the curators and the directors here at IPCNY for this opportunity to speak about my work, and also, obviously, for having invited me to participate in this exhibition. So this very large print you see here on the far wall, this is a silk mezzotent. It's a relatively unknown technique. It actually, the result is like a traditional mezzotent, but rather than working on a metal plate, you work with a nylon silkscreen mesh, and that's what holds the ink down. But it's the same principle that your image is built by actually adding white values. So you're working in reverse. And the series name is called Abyssalia, and that references what is the abyssal zones of the ocean, where there is no light and there is massive amounts of pressure. And that is what determines what some of the life forms that we see down there, how they appear, and how they are shaped, and the characteristics they have. For instance, they have translucent bodies, or they have bioluminescent bodies, or they have very strange shapes due to all these physical conditions of so much pressure of water and no light whatsoever. So I'm interested in finding these sort of consonance between what is the materiality of printmaking and the meaning and the morphology of this type of life form. And so this is all painted. It's literally, you're printing a painting that is done with acrylic. And the way I create these patterns in this sort of articulation is by pressing objects onto the viscous paint. It's acrylic paint. And that's what creates this sort of like dendrites and these sort of like very biomorphic shapes. There's of course precedent for these types of forms and shapes. The first one that I'm sure everyone is familiar with is the decalcomania from the surrealist Oscar Dominguez. But it's something that actually goes back even further. We have the work of the French poet George Sand, that in the 19th century she actually made a series of watercolors that you can see if you visit her home in Paris. These beautiful watercolors where she actually creates this reticulation and then goes back and paints in a landscape. Then there's the work of Max Ernst. He did this in his paintings, his very large paintings, Europe After the Rain. So there is this interesting sort of lineage of artists that have worked with this process. And also I'm interested in the fact that the images and the shapes are made by pressing onto the plate. So you have this repeated pattern of printing, pressing, and then printing the final image. The other print that I have is this one here. It's a copper plate photogravure. It's a still life. My titles are very significant in this case. This is called Seeing Viscera, but I use the French term, which is called viscère voyant. And the reason I do that, it's because I pay homage to a French philosopher. His name is Roger Caillois. He was a surrealist, sort of a renegade surrealist, broke away from Breton's group, along with Georges Bataille. But he would, I think he would recognize some interesting characteristics about this piece. And it has to do with haruspicy. Haruspicy is the ancient practice, the art of divination, by actually pulling out animals' entrails and reading the entrails. Typically they would do it with livers, but they do it also with other type of intestines. And this is actually a very large piece of cow gut, tripe. And what I've done is I've sort of inverted that gaze. So it's now the tripe that is staring out at the viewer and determining by looking straight at them what is going to be the fate of that person. So this is sort of reversal of what is the idea of the gaze, of what is prediction, and now it's turned on to us by this sort of omniscient orb. And this is copper plate photogravure. So these are just a few of the series of my prints that I've been working on over the past few years. And yeah, well, thank you for your attention.